Thank you for joining me today. My name is Lee Reams with TaxBuzz, and today we're going to talk about getting to the bottom of the tax reform proposals, and we're going to go through the progressive, flat, and fair tax. This is part of a series of our Thought Leader series that we run through TaxBuzz on our blog, and we try to meet with people who give us some different insight and different point of view on the way our tax system works, different tax reform proposals, and kind of the what's on the horizon. So today we are joined by Lee Reams Sr., one of our tax experts and editor-in-chief at TaxBuzz.com. Welcome, Mr. Reams. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, thank you. How about yourself?
Very good. So before I get into the questions here, I kind of want to give a little bit of a feedback or summary of why we're meeting and what I really would like to, kind of the insight I'd like to get to our viewers. So the first issue is obviously with the 2016 election, cycle in full bloom. There are a number of Republican candidates right now. The debates were very recently done, and you're hearing a lot of noise out there about tax reform. Local surveys and even some national ones that have come out in the last few days have said that the business side of things, as far as CEOs of companies, believe that the chance of tax reform happening even before 2017 has actually gone from the high 50s to the low 40s. So the more they talk about it, it seems the more people feel that it won't happen. So I still think it's important that taxpayers understand what the current progressive policy is and really get an idea of when people say flat tax and fair tax, what they're talking about. So let's start out here. If you could, just please tell me a little bit about our progressive system, the way it was designed to work, and the way it's kind of evolved to what we have today. So go ahead, Mr. Reams.
Well, our progressive system is based on taxing the lower income people at the minimum amount. And then as your income increases, they keep raising your tax rates until you get to the top income people and they pay the top rate. So basically there's 10% of all the taxpayers in the United States pay 90% of the taxes. Where on the flip side of that, 1/3 of the taxpayers in the United States, that's those in the lowest incomes, they actually pay no tax at all. They receive refundable credits and other benefits that actually give them money back instead of paying taxes.
So would you say the complexity of the progressive system has been the addition of all these different credits and other things that the traditional progressive tax, if left alone, would actually, everybody would be paying taxes at that point, and it's all these deductions and kind of the special interests in some way that perhaps have kind of changed the progressive system to what we have today. Was that a fair assessment?
That's a fair assessment, yes.
Okay.
Because every year they keep tacking on more and more changes and adjustments, and it just keeps getting worse.
Okay, so let's turn now to the flat tax. So explain to me kind of, we've heard some different tax rates that are being floated around, but just give us an idea of, what kind of rates are people talking about in a flat tax, and exactly how would a flat tax work?
Well, if you took a true flat tax, everybody would get taxed at the same rate on all their income. And what we've heard from most of the politicians is ranging from 12 to 20%. And so regardless of how much you make, you would pay that flat amount. But that may not work in the future because of the people who are right now receiving other benefits, and they would take those away from them. So.
Okay, so wouldn't that create a larger tax for lower income individuals than what they are paying today?
That's a very good observation. That's why a true flat tax will probably never come along. It's going to be a flat tax with adjustments and extra benefits and credits and stuff like that. So yeah, this won't work in our current system that we have now.
Okay, and you've kind of alluded to a little bit to kind of what you call a social control system, and explain to me what you mean by that, and it kind of go back to this, the one thing we didn't say is, yeah, there's actually a huge tax reduction, I guess, for higher income individuals if they're now paying in the high 30s and more with different Affordable Care Act rates in there. So kind of explain to me, what you mean by social control system.
Well, let's say Congress wants people to put in solar systems to generate electricity. Well, they generate a credit to do that. Say they want people to get off of welfare and go to work, then they add in what they call the earned income tax credit. So the lower income people who are working for a minor wage will actually get extra money given to them through the tax system to bring that up. So that's called the earned income tax credit. And then that years ago, they wanted everybody to own their own home. So they gave them an interest and tax deduction on their home mortgages and their home taxes. So all these kinds of things as they add to the system to do their bidding, the Congress's bidding. Right now, we have the premium tax credit as an inducement to get people to buy insurance through the marketplace and become insured. So all these are incentives to do what the government wants you to do.
Okay, so your observation here then is some of the challenges with any tax reform would be how do you get the special interests and the lobbyists out of the process? And I would kind of segue that into, if there is a big tax reform change, how do they guarantee that it's a revenue neutral changeover? Meaning, the biggest fear is for the government at least, and maybe it would be great for the rest of us taxpayers is, they used to have a system that generated $2.7 trillion or whatever in taxes, and now they have a system that's 400 or 500 million short. That's obviously going to create a huge problem with our borrowing and then budgets across the board. But kind of share with us your thoughts on those two issues.
Well, I've got previously mentioned the top 10% of the nation's taxpayers pay 90% of the income tax. So a 20% rate would represent a substantial reduction for them because they're paying in excess of 39% of the top rate. So they would love that, the well-to-do people would. Now, the Tax Policy Center of the Brookings Institute recently reviewed Rick Perry's flat tax proposal and said that there's going to reduce Americans' tax liability by $995 billion. So that's about a 27% cut in the tax revenues for the nation. That certainly is not going to work. They're looking for more revenue, not less. And his isn't really a flat tax in the first place. It's a hybrid. So yeah, we're going to have a 20% flat tax, but we're going to let home mortgage interest and taxes be deductible, allow charitable contributions and state income tax deductions, and then he doesn't want to tax Social Security income or long-term capital gains. So one end, the Social Security not being taxable, that's helping the low-income people on Social Security. But what about the long-term capital gains for these big Wall Street gentlemen? So there's some interesting things in that.
Okay, well, obviously, I don't think it would fly with a 27% reduction in tax revenue. So I think people could argue that economic activity would be higher, more people would be hiring, and perhaps, as incomes rise, the tax base would increase. But that's kind of their counter to that. But yeah, no matter what, it's a risky endeavor. $995 billion is a huge number. So let's kind of change up, then get away from the flat tax to something that most people have not heard about, and that's the fair tax. And I would tell people to go to fairtax.org if you want to kind of read up and see a little more details. So they have some research there and kind of goes through it. But give me a kind of an overview. Basically, it's a nationwide sales tax. But give me some insight on how these taxes would be collected.
Well, the fair tax, as it's called, eliminates both the payroll taxes and the income taxes and replaces it with a national sales tax of 23% on both goods and services. Now, before, services were not normally included in sales tax. So let's take an example. So you go out and buy a shirt for $70 that you would normally pay $70 for, pay a little bit of state income tax, but now with the 23% tax on built into it, that shirt's going to cost you not $70 but $86.10. So you're going to add $16.10 of federal sales tax. And then think about if you go and get your hair cut, cost you $20, they're going to charge you sales tax on top of that too.
Yeah, but
so wouldn't
I was going to say the fair tax people are saying that overall, since your income is not being taxed, you're going to actually have more money in your pocket. So maybe paying an extra $16.10 for your haircut isn't that big of a deal. One of the things I wanted to lead into is I don't know how they would deal with how you would have a national, state, and local tax. How does that? What agencies? I know the fair tax, and reading about it, wants to abolish the IRS. So and I'm just throwing this out. I'm sure you don't have an exact answer, but exactly then, if there's no IRS, there's got to be someone who's going to be auditing this. There's going to be someone who is kind of managing some of the things I think you're going to get into as well with the prebate. But what are your thoughts on, or explain, I guess, since we're talking about prebate, what are your thoughts on the prebate? And then secondarily, how would, without an agency to manage revenue, exactly what is the game plan there? What are your thoughts?
Well, number one, somebody has to collect the tax, somebody has to pay the rebates, and somebody has to make sure that the prebates are based upon the actual income. So the IRS isn't going to go away. IRS just, if they have this fair tax, as they call it, just going to start administering the fair tax instead of the income tax. So it's the same difference. So it's just these are proposals that people don't think all the way through, and I think sometimes they do it during the election season just to get elected. So,
well, I guess we'll see soon enough, right? But let's then talk. I did ask a little bit about the states, but how do you think the states would be involved? We're here in California, so we obviously have a very high sales tax rate. There's local taxes on there as well. And then there's income taxes and property taxes and all kinds of things. I was trying to figure out, just kind of reviewing it, would the fair tax assume that all states then abolish their income tax? And, would the sales tax be on top of the national tax and the local? I mean, and then what would they do with the income tax to replace that? Otherwise, it seems it would be still kind of a somewhat complicated deal when you're doing your taxes. But what are your thoughts about the states and how they've involved?
The states are not going to give up their sales tax revenue. They live off of that. Plus, a lot of local communities do that as well. So, and they're obviously not going to give up their state income taxes. I mean, you go to some place like Texas, doesn't have a state income tax, but then the property taxes are gigantic. So they're getting the tax one way or the other. So it's just an interesting case. If they actually had the fair tax, you would say if you were in California, for instance, and you had an 8% state tax rate, now you add the state to the 23% federal, and you have to 31% tax. The haircut would go up to $26.20.
Wow.
$20 one.
Definitely. So those are I guess these are the questions that just need to be addressed or answered in hoping to get policies from the candidates as they go through. But I know some of these details are there. Some of them use some older details, but I think these are valid questions in today's market. So that kind of brings me into, do you think there would be a fear on your side that we would get a kind of an underground economy because the sales tax rates would become so high? Would people just start paying in cash and somehow try to hide it? I mean, kind of what are your thoughts about that?
Well, they're doing that now with the income tax. So I don't know how this is going to correct that situation. Hypothetically, if tax is collected on everything you buy, you pay sales tax. Sure, you're going to buy some groceries. You go buy a car. You go buy some clothes at the store. You're going to pay some tax. But now comes a time when you're dealing with the guy who provides services, like the contractors who help fix something up your house, or your gardener or somebody like that. They're going to say, just pay me cash and forget the sales tax. So it's the same thing as you have going on now for services. So,
but I guess just on a larger scale, obviously. I mean, the incentive is there not to hide it. I mean, that's for sure. I mean, that's a serious percentage. I guess people would have more money, is the argument, and but that's an interesting question, and it could be debated as these policies are looked through. So kind of going back to this abolish the IRS and pound on the IRS. Right now we know Congress has taken a lot of money out of their budget. The Obama administration is actually starting or trying in the next budget to increase the funding back for the IRS. But everything is saying, let's abolish the IRS. It's an easy target. You know, kind of what is your thought process on that? Is that something that will happen, you know, in the near future, or, you know, perhaps 10, 20 years from now?
You know, no matter what tax system we have, everybody's going to try to cheat it. Not everybody, but we have a large number of people who think that's a fair game to play this day and age. So the IRS stands for Internal Revenue Service, and income tax and consumption tax are both internal taxes. So why would the IRS continue to collect the national sales tax and enforce its provisions? I don't see why it would. So they're not going to get rid of the IRS. They're just going to change what the IRS is doing.
And then, you know, the way the lobbyists and I guess the politicians work, probably start adding complexity to whatever changed plan that we see. So I guess one final question for you, and it kind of goes, do you think the lobbyists and outside influence ever will give us a simple, fair system?
Well, that's a really loaded question. If the lobbyist's job is to influence government action in favor of special interests they represent, so I think you know the answer to that question. They're going to continue to do that, and there's not much you can do about it. The only way to get rid of that is to ban lobbyists.
All right, so there's it. That's going to be the summary of this: is ban lobbyists, and we'll fix all of our problems. So maybe we don't have to change. Yeah, we don't have to change the tax code at all. Let's ban the lobbyists, and Washington will clean up its act. But again, thank you very much for your time today. Really appreciate it, and we'll come back to you with any follow-up questions from our viewers. But that will wrap up our thought leader interview today here on Tax Reform Proposals. Again, the progressive, flat, and fair tax. Thank you.